Welcome to the seventh continent. You are early explorers in the 20th century, maybe late 19th century. The point is you are on an expedition to find the seventh continent, and you've returned, and you're having terrible nightmares, and then one night, in the throes of a terrible nightmare, you wake up back where you were, except that you don't remember anything. Final thoughts. Today, we're very lucky to be discussing Seventh Continent. This is a very hot game right now that had a very successful Kickstarter and is currently, if I get this up in time, in the last 24 hours of a second Kickstarter for a second print run of it. My goal was to try to get a review of this up before that Kickstarter was done, and I kept delaying it and delaying it and delaying it because, let me tell you, this is a big game. And I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. Everything I just said for flavor is in the very first page of this rulebook. So I haven't really spoiled anything for you. If you don't want that, then you should stop now and not watch any reviews. And I respect that because this is a game about discovery. It's been called a choose-your-own adventure game, and I think that's how the folks at Serious Pulp originally described it. In my experience, it's not a choose-your-own adventure game. It's a choose-your-own atlas game, which is to say it's not actually a very story-driven experience. It's a discovery-driven experience where you will be navigating around an uncharted territory. All of this is in service to alleviating some curse. This will be the first one you'll probably play with, the Voracious Goddess. Don't look at that if you don't want a spoiler. But this will be in your satchel over here with our pocket watch, and you can see we've got an experience point. And it's difficult to tell you much more about the game than that without spoiling it for you. So let me try to get through the big picture stuff before I give you a little bit of the details, and you can turn this off at your discretion. I don't know where to start with this game, which says something about it. It's big, right? I mean, it's not only is it big in terms of scope, but it's going to take up a huge amount of table space, and yet it all fits in this box. And how it works is it's a series of cards that you will be directed to dig through based on other cards, and then they will tell you essentially what to do once you pull them out. I could pull them out for you, but I don't want to ruin this. I don't want to ruin the experience. And it's going to be half the fun of this game is you have no idea what's in here. I don't know how long it's going to take to finally get to see all of these things. And just like in a Choose Your Own Adventure book, it's going to take a lot of restraint not to just maybe peek at the card, especially because some of them will be a gold card. And what that means is that you are supposed to exhaust the number, the green version of it, and then when there is no more green cards, you look at the gold card. It's a very simple system, and it works really well, and it allows you to know just as much as you need to know, and you explore this whole terrain based on a system I'll get to in a minute, but for the sake of not spoiling any of the experience, I just want to talk about what it feels like to play this game. This game is Kickstarter at its best, and in some ways at its worst. I really can't emphasize enough how big this game is. I mentioned that I wanted to finish the first curse before I did the review. I've played this game for 8 hours now, at least. I don't know, I haven't kept track, maybe even 10. And I don't think I'm anywhere near finishing the first curse. There's a ton of this game I haven't gotten to yet. And that's something to keep in mind. I mean, this is a generous game for the amount of money that they're asking, which is not nothing. And part of that is because you are literally wandering somewhat aimlessly around an undiscovered continent. And I really think the best way to describe this is a choose your own atlas. You're not turning the page and getting more story. You're going to the next tile and going to the next tile, and you're still just as lost as ever. What's amazing about that is that you really do have to pick a direction and just start walking in that direction and deal with the fact that there are things to your left and things to your right that you're never going to see, which is an amazing feat that I've never experienced in a board game before, to really feel like you are lost in the woods, and it will feel like you are fighting for survival at times. And there's also this amazing thing that happens with sort of like the fourth wall will go away, as you will actually be using this magnifying glass to look closely at the tile to try to decide where to go, and there'll actually be little clues. So the way the game works here is, here you'll be on a tile that will look like this, and it'll be surrounded by fog basically. And say you want to go here, this is an action, it costs 0 cards and you need 0 stars. Everything that you do in this game is dictated by having to flip over a certain amount of cards and get a certain amount of successes. It's a very simple system that works very well. In this case, it's free, and although it has a 0+, so you could choose to turn over a card if you wanted. Now the thing is, once you go through all of these cards and they go into the discard pile here, you then shuffle the discard pile and restart. And in so doing, when you're going through that, if you come across a curse card, that's the end of the game and you've lost. So you want to be very, very precious about this deck. So you might not want to choose to turn over any cards here because it's essentially a free action. But you might want to do it because, as you can see here by my hand, when you do that, you can choose to keep a card and it goes into your hand. And then from your hand, if there's a card in your inventory, so this is in your hand, you can choose to build it and it goes into your inventory. So that's it. That's basically the entire game right there. And everything beyond that is an elaboration. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose to not do that. And then you flip over this card, and I'm not going to show you what's on it because that would be a spoiler. But there's going to be something here that I have to make some kind of check in order to succeed. And I can then look at my items and see if any of them help me in this check. And I'm just going to go ahead and pretend that this does, even though that makes no sense because this is snowshoes and you basically use it to move when there's snow. So I would then use this item, its durability goes down, and then I'm just going to pretend that allows me to draw fewer of these cards, and then I flip over 1 and then 2, and I succeed. Actually, I would have failed because I only got 1 star. You need to, this is where you look for your successes, right? And so these don't match up, so they're not worth anything. Don't match up. Don't match up. Don't match up. But those would match up. And you can also see that there are character-specific cards. And only those characters can take those cards. Then the rest go to the discard pile. Only one of the characters involved in an action can take a card. You can involve any amount of the characters that you want in an action, and that can be a good idea or a bad idea. Once you've resolved that, and there will be text on the card that tells you what to do in case of a success, which will be in white, and there will be text on the card that will tell you what to do in case of a failure, and that will be in black. And then, on that particular action, you look at the number, see this number is a 059, you dig through here to get that card, here it is, you put it down, and now you have the ability to move to here at the cost of whatever the movement is. And in this case, movement is quite difficult. Fortunately, I have an item that will help me move here, and anyone can choose to go with me if they wish. And that's essentially the entire game, is you go from place to place and you look and it'll tell you, oh, I can take that specific type of action. and I have this kind of a resource. And beyond that, you just have to play it to essentially learn the game, which is one of the things that has been commented on, and I think is worth mentioning, is that this rule book is pretty skimpy for what it is. I mean, it really doesn't... This rule book treats you like this is a need-to-know situation and you do not need to know, which can be frustrating because there'll be things that you don't understand because you don't need to understand, but you don't know that, and so you spend a lot of time flipping through this, or at least I do when I play it, and I can imagine that you'd get to a place where you'd get into a kind of a rhythm, but there's always things interrupting the rhythm in this game. I mean, the whole act of it is a little bit fiddly. I mean, constantly you will be digging through these cards, looking for exactly, oh, hold on, okay, no, this is the one I need. And it doesn't stop being fiddly because you're constantly looking through, oh, we're here, okay, I'm gonna take that action, it means I need to draw a card, all right, do you wanna keep that? Keep that. And then need to turn over that card. Here it is, okay. On it, right? It's just, it's a really good system. I want to be clear. It's kind of an amazing system, and clearly a lot of love and attention went into it, and that is commendable and admirable. Actually, the game that it reminds me of in that sense is one of our favorite games ever. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Not this one, but the original one that was released in 1980. This is the next 10 cases. And similarly, a lot of love must have gone into this game for them to figure out all of the different potential text that you could read. A lot of work. And this reminds me of that. The amount of work that must have gone into crafting this system and realizing all the different branching paths you could have gone to draw this card or that card or this card. It feels like there's this huge world, and the only thing that is stopping you from seeing it all is the physicality of how huge that world is, and the fact that you just can't see it all. And that's really incredible. So you are making choices about which direction to go and which actions to take, and all the while being constantly aware that this is running preciously low, and the only way to get it back up is to eat food or do things in the game that the game will tell you about. And there are these really exciting moments. Like one time we were down to 6 cards in this deck, and we needed to eat. I was really worried about it. And so we were like, okay, we need to hunt, but we had just gotten to this new place and we had no idea what we were doing. And we quite literally looked at these cards and followed footprints. We literally tracked an animal, and it turned out that one of these actions on this card revealed a card that allowed us to hunt. And the hunt action brought us down to 1 card. And then the act of resolving that allowed us to take the action and draw exactly 1 card and be successful. That's all we had left. If we drew anything else, we would have had to take the entire discard pile and shuffled it and put it back down. But we were successful. We hunted, we got some food, we cooked that food, we ate it, and we were back in the game. That was an amazing and thematic moment. And I'm just realizing now that even that I should put something on the video about a spoiler, but that's nothing compared to other stuff that will happen in this game. And that's that's this game at its best. I mean, that moment is truly great. And in order for that to happen, it has to exist in this larger context where you are wandering aimlessly and you're potentially lost and you're dwindling down and you're constantly discovering things. But the flip side to that is that you're constantly lost and wandering aimlessly and you never know where you're going, and there isn't an arc of tension. There's sort of a constant fight for survival. It really captures that feeling of you are lost and deserted on an island. Sometimes it feels like it's the plot of the movie Castaway, and you'll build up your inventory of items and you'll get better at surviving, but then the island or the continent or whatever will throw stuff at you and you'll have to deal with it. And that's all fun, but there isn't that arc of that game arc. And the reason why is because this scenario will take about 25 hours or so, I've been told. I haven't even finished it, and I've played for at least 10. And so you're not really meant to finish it all in one go. In fact, there's a really, really handy-dandy save system. It's actually one of the many things that I really admire about this game is how well the save system works. You take this out, you take this out, you put your items in there and you use this card to mark what the die was on, and you put your person on it, and you put it all together on top of the one space that you're in, and everything else goes back into the box, and boom, you're saved, right? The whole game's saved, you put everything else away, it packs away nicely, and then you pop it all out again. The thing that's great about the save system is that you're going to actually exploit it in order to help you get through this game. There will be times when you need to save this game even if you want to continue playing, just so you can reduce all of the stuff that's going on, right? And there will be other times where you really don't want to save the game yet. You want to get just a little farther until you save the game. And so that's really neat. I really like that you can stop the game whenever you want. I like how even saving the game is a part of this fourth wall sort of shattering experience, similar to the fact that looking at the cards and finding footprints or finding hidden numbers or just literally looking at the stuff that's here will tell you, it'll give you a clue. So there's all these ways in which the fourth wall is sort of blurry, and that's all that's really admirable. But the flip side of it is that you're constantly playing, you don't really know if you're getting somewhere, you might be on a false lead, and then what you end up with is a very big game that's going to monopolize not just your table in a literal sense, but it's going to monopolize your evenings. So in terms of whether or not you should back this, and we'll see if I get this up in time, that anyone would see it before the Kickstarter's over, you really have to ask yourself what you're looking for in a game, right? I mean, there's hours of gameplay here, and it's a cooperative experience, and it's a good cooperative experience, although I will say that since you play everything face up, there's a real alpha gamer problem, and it's particularly bad because only one person will be driving this system, will be pulling the cards from here and placing them on the table, and only that person will really understand the game in its fullness, which is unfortunate because it means the other people won't get as much enjoyment out of the experience as that person, although that person, their experience will be diminished by the fact that they are the person that's constantly cataloging all the cards instead of being able to kind of absorb it. A potential solution that I've seen floating around there is that people play this game solo, but I don't recommend that either because I think that a part of the enjoyment is experiencing it with somebody else and fighting for survival together and tending to each other's wounds. You will get wounded in this game in a variety of different ways. And fighting together and surviving together, and to do all of that alone is sort of like if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody care? But then there's this problem where it's going to be really difficult not to want to tell that person what to do. And this is made even worse by the fact that there isn't even a clear you go and I go, you go and I go. It's whoever wants to be active on a turn, and whoever is on that person's tile can go along. So there's this weird amorphous who is the current player thing that's happening, and then all the cards are face up, and then the fact that oftentimes there really is a best decision. We should do this first. We should do this next. What that can lead to is a lot of opportunities for the other people around the table to not be engaged, either because you're looking through these cards and so they're not paying attention, they're maybe on their phone, or because you are maybe making too many of the decisions, it's going to be really hard to stop yourself, if you're like me, from being that guy. And if you're not that guy, it's going to be really easy to allow somebody else to be that guy or gal, if that makes sense. There's just a lot of opportunity for an alpha gamer here. However, if you are perfectly matched with somebody else and you're both really in the mood for this kind of an experience, it can be amazing. Or it could be an amazing solo game. Don't let me write that off. It's just not appealing to me because, you know, I would achieve all these feats, but with there being no one else there to see me do it, or for me to see someone else do it, it's almost like it didn't happen. But that's just my personal opinion. If you're really into solo games, I could see it working really well. Although, for my money, even as a solo game, the number one problem with this whole design for me is that it is so greedy in terms of what it wants to take up of my table and what it wants to take up of my evening, that it gets in the way of me wanting to play other games. That's what it's been like this entire past couple of weeks, where I've been trying to get this review done in order to have it up before the Kickstarter was done. I was just playing this game not because I was so excited to play it, but because of an obligation. Now, I know that was sort of self-imposed, and you could argue that this is a game that you will cherish and play for years, and that's true. But you know, there are amazing games that are coming out all the time, and I'm not getting what I already own to the table as much as I'd like. And so for me, the amount of content in this box is almost a drawback. And yet, that really bums me out, because I know there's a ton of things in here. Well, it's actually right over here. There's a ton of things in here that I'm never going to experience. And I also am aware of the fact that in order to truly appreciate what that experience, I need to get there the hard way. I need to fight through this game. I need to play it evening after evening and survive evening after evening, so that when I get to that crucial decision and it's life or death, it's life or death, and all of those hours of gameplay built up to that moment. I get that that is the core of this experience, and if that sounds fun to you and you have the time, really time more than money, to dedicate to that, then I think you should buy it. But if you're having trouble getting games that you own to the table already, I advise you to think twice about it. I mean, right now this game is hot, and people are, in fact, I have to finish this review because my friend Brad is going to sell this to somebody else who wants to play it right now. And I think that's great, but I think for a lot of people, this one just isn't for them. I think, as I said, this is the best and worst of Kickstarter. They've said that they can't make a retail version of this because it's too expensive to produce, and I don't get that, because really at its heart it's just a bunch of cards, and those are pretty easy to produce and pretty cheap. But I think it's closer to the truth that this game works better as a Kickstarter, because it, even as popular as it is now, it is still essentially a cult game. A game that you're going to have to Kickstarter, find in the secondary market, and you're going to have to, oh man, you have this in your hands, and then you're going to have to delve into it and fight the game in some ways. I don't know how to put this. This is not a game where the fun is just readily accessible. You have to really work to find the fun. And when you find it, it's amazing. But there's a lot of things that get in the way of that. And so I think the reality is that this isn't a game that works as retail, not because it costs too much to produce, but because you need to have that kind of buy-in already before the game even hits the table. You have to be invested in getting that experience. And I think for a lot of people who, even if they want that, they just aren't going to have the time to be able to get at the meat of what's in here. And let me tell you, what's in here is, it's great. Or I think it's great. I really do believe that there's 10 times more, 20 times more in here than I've even scratched the surface of. But I know I'm never going to get there, because I've got a lot of other games. I've got 8 cases left in Sherlock Holmes. I've got a lot of Arkham Horror, the card game, to get through. And I gotta tell you, minute for minute, pound for pound, that game gives me more decisions to make and more payout and a more consistent arc. So none of this is to say this is a bad design or that you shouldn't get it, but just be careful, because you might find yourself obsessing over this, and this might consume you. And that's the final way that the theme of this so almost comes off the board and invests your real life. You will be playing only this. And if that sounds like you are ready for the challenge, then I highly encourage you to get it. But that sounds like a lot, then I also encourage you to think about it.